So the MCAT evaluates one main skill, and that one of the best ways to develop that skill is to do thousands of practice questions in the right way. And that's the summary point. That's basically it. That is the one summary point I want you to take away. Do thousands of practice questions in the right way. And as you're doing those thousands of practice questions, you're getting feedback. You're getting a lot of them wrong because you're not very good at that skill yet. And so as you're getting them wrong, you're getting feedback on why you got them wrong. And that feedback needs to be three things: timely, specific, and actionable. Timely meaning it comes shortly after you do the practice question. Specific meaning you identify specifically why you got it wrong. When you do these MCAT questions, you go through certain mental thought processes, or your mind does, every time you approach a question. And it's really helpful to identify which one of those went wrong. Because it's not enough to say, like, I suck at stoichiometry problems, or I can't memorize like how to manipulate ideal gas laws and stuff like that. No, it's oftentimes something much more specific. Because if you can make it specific, then you can create an actionable target, meaning something that you can address so you lower the likelihood of making that same mistake in the future. And so now as you're getting your feedback, you want to write it down. You want to create a document where you basically, it's just like your personal diary, your catalog of all your MCAT mistakes, where you just take note of why you got something wrong. And that how much you write can range from writing, jotting one line about the question, what your answer was, what the correct answer was, why you got it wrong, what you're going to do to address it, to something as simple as just why I got it wrong, and then like one line or one word about what you need to do next. And as you build up this document, the act of writing it, forcing yourself to manipulate the info by thinking about it and typing it out, burns it into your head a lot better. While you create it, you build up this thing that you can, like a searchable document that you can review. It almost becomes like your own personal content review book, specific to your own weaknesses and your own mistakes. Because all that stuff that you learn in your pre-med courses, it's like all put into long-term storage. And what they never taught you in those classes is how to apply that stuff to MCAT style questions. And that is that's what the prep really is. It's applying all that stuff that's stuck somewhere back there to MCAT style questions. I mean, and that may sound obvious, and hopefully that is obvious. But if that is true, then one of the better ways, and what I think is one of the best ways to develop that skill of applying all that stuff to MCAT style questions is to do thousands of practice questions in the right way. And so that's it. That's the summary. Is as you're doing these questions, you have to get feedback. You're going to get a lot of them wrong. Focus on the ones you got wrong. You need feedback on the ones you got right too, but much more important to get the feedback on the ones you got wrong. Why you got it wrong, and what you can do to lower the likelihood of getting it wrong again in the future, and make this document that tracks your journey.
Yeah, quick question. Will this PowerPoint be available after the webinar?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it'll be available slightly modified because like a lot of it is images and things that I say that go along with them. And so if you don't have the things that I say that go along with them, it's kind of hard to follow along with just pictures. The webinar will also be available, but yeah, a version that has a little more text in it explaining this stuff will be available. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to ask people this question: what worries you the most about preparing for the MCAT?
Well, for me, it's just preparing for how to study for it.
How to study for it? Like you're not sure how to study for it?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a lot of material, so it's like, how do I start?
How do you start? Like, how do you fit it all in? How do you make sure that you're doing the right thing? Okay.
Dominica mentioned running out of time, and Jessica mentioned the car section.
Running out of time meaning running out of time to prepare, or running out of time on the exam?
That's what she said. Timing.
Timing, like on the exam. Like you
Exam.
don't have enough time to finish all the questions. Yeah, no, that's a very real concern, and I'll address that as well. And then cars. Yeah, cars is a real pain for many people, and it was for me back then. So I took the exam, the MCAT, in 2006. It was the last time they had it on paper with the Scantron sheets, and it was the old numbers, like up to 45, and the verbal reasoning section. It's pretty similar. We didn't have the psychology and sociology section, but otherwise, it's pretty similar. Some of the question styles are a little different, the new ones, but yeah.
Someone also, Jessica mentioned, forgetting information that they've already reviewed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's a very big one. And thank you for bringing that, because that will also be touched upon here. Like, how do you deal with that? It's almost like you have all this information and you try to start juggling it. And you juggle 2 balls, 3 balls, 4 balls, and then you're juggling 500 balls. And And how do you keep them all up, right? Because you need to kind of have them ready to go as when you walk in on exam day. Let's see. Sorry about changing the screen here. Just wanted to see how to study smarter, timing, breaking down the language of the exam. Yes. And test anxiety, repetition of material learned, so cycling. How to read fast and get the information to answer the question. Yeah, those are all important parts of the skill of answering these MCAT questions. And if you think about all these things, how to read fast, it's something you do, right? It's not some knowledge, it's something that you do. How do you read fast to get the information to answer the question? That's also a skill. It's something you do, not physically, but mentally. You're finding the information. And then, yeah, and then how to study smarter. So that's also something you do. How to work on timing, that's something you do. These are all things that you do, breaking down the language of the exam. These are all like skills, like take any sport. It's made up of lots of little skills, like basketball. I don't play basketball, but from people that tell me they play basketball, like especially the serious people, when they practice, let's say they practice their jump shot, they don't just kind of dribble around and shoot from wherever. They're very intentional about it. They break it down to small specific parts of where they put their feet, how they bend their knees, how they hold the ball, how they shoot, where they aim, how they follow through, and what they do on subsequent trials to make it better. And so all these things are things that you do. And that's fortunate because it's much easier to improve things you do rather than things you know. Reading passages like scientific journals, yes. Research-based passages with a lot of info. Oh my God, those are quite terrible. They can be quite terrible. Everyone complains how the MCAT read like a science journal and had questions about research design. Yeah, so all those things are things that you're going to have to deal with, and hopefully what I talk about will give you some kind of framework into how to deal with all of this stuff and more. So yeah, like everyone feels, and I felt like this, like there's this sea of materials, and there's just so much to choose from. So many different prep companies, so much different advice. You go on Reddit, MCAT, and there's like 1,000,001 different strings of advice. You go on SDN, on Student Doctor Network. There's so much stuff that people write, and you wonder like, well, how do I know which to trust? Like, sure, yeah, they have some interest in making it work, but they also have a lot of money interest in it, and it's hard to tease that apart. Like, it is really hard. And so how do you know that one prep company's advice is something that makes sense? Like, what is that based on? Does anybody do research on this? Like when you get leukemia treatments, it's not just the doctor giving you a dash of this and a pinch of that. It's based on years of research and evidence saying that this works probably better than that regimen. And so similar with this, is there any evidence to show that one MCAT prep method works better than another? Not really, no. We're all kind of flying by the seat of our pants. And so one of the things I want to talk about is that in all these materials, some of them probably matter a little more than others, but I think what matters more is how you use them rather than which ones you use. And so some of the aims I want to carry out in this discussion is explain this one summary point, what it means to do thousands of questions in the right way. And as I'm going through, just keep that in your mind, like, what does that mean in the right way? That's kind of like the crux of it right there. Like, does that mean that there is a wrong way? Well, I don't know. Wouldn't it be great if there was a right way? Wouldn't it be nice if like the AAMC just told us like, this is probably the better way to study? Or if someone just said, this is probably the better way? I mean, there probably are better ways. There must be, right? There must be differences in people that do well and people that don't do as well. Differences, like not just in who they are or how they have learned, but how they train, how they practice. And this is another thing I want you to do is realize that the MCAT tests something you can do and not just something you know. If you realize that, then you would understand that reading content review prepares you to know and not to do. It's doing all those practice questions in the right way that helps you, that prepares you to do. And all along the way, it also develops some of the know, which is like an added bonus. It's like a 2-for-1. And at the end of all this, I want you to begin developing a picture in your mind of what this kind of practice looks like, what that MCAT skill looks like, and how the daily practice of it goes, and how do you know you're like cracking away at it in a better way as opposed to a not so good way. So at the title, I mentioned this thing, deliberate practice. Has anybody heard of this? Have either of you heard of this term, deliberate practice? No? Anybody in the webcam session heard of deliberate practice? No?
Nope.
So just like I was saying, there's no evidence whatsoever in like one MCAT prep strategy versus another. Performance psychologists, they study people in other fields like sports, musical performance, chess, because those are easy to study. And what they try to find out is people who are really good at what they do, how do they get to be really good at what they do? All those expert performers, what is it that they do that makes them so good? Are they born that way? Well, they found out no, but there is something that they do, and there are differences in their training methods. And so there's this one guy, he wrote this recent popular science book, which kind of summarizes his like 30+ years of research. He's dedicated his life to figuring this out. What's different about how expert performers practice? And it's a fascinating read. I would highly encourage you to read it, this guy, Anders Ericsson. But that's it. It's like, what's different about how people who are really good at what they do, how do they practice differently? Because what if I practiced that way? Would it make me really good? And it turns out that the MCAT activity or the MCAT skill fits in very nicely with all these other activities of playing sports, playing chess, musical performance, because it's all a skill. When you go in on test day, that's a performance you're doing. You've trained, you've like practiced your scales and your violin and whatever, and now you're going in to do the performance on that one day, and it's a lot of stakes. It's a very high stakes performance. And I'm not going to talk too much about deliberate practice beyond that, other than without you realizing and incorporating elements of it into all the stuff that comes next. So the things I'm going to talk about is this main skill. After that, how deliberate practice is applied to the MCAT, what it looks like in everyday practice, and if we have time at the end, why? Just a brief explanation of like why I'm doing any of this. And before we go on, I just want to make this point that most of us up to this point in our lives have never had to do training of this kind. It's not saying that we haven't had to do hard things. We have. I mean, all of us had to work hard even just to get to this point. You had to work really hard in high school, in college, at every step of the way. So it's not necessarily about lack of working hard. It's just that this requires a whole different mentality about how you train for it. And unless you've done something like high-level sports, competitive sports, or musical performance, like where you've been playing the violin since age 5, and you practice hours and hours a day for many years, it's really hard. You really haven't had a sense of what this kind of training requires. It's like the level of OCD and time commitment and pain that goes along with it, and then eventual enjoyment of that pain. So this main skill, I wanted to ask you, what do you think that main skill is? What is the main skill that the MCAT evaluates?
You comprehend a lot of information to answer like certain questions.
Yeah. What do you think?
I'm not too sure.
Okay, no, that's fine. That's fine.
So in the chat box, we have critical thinking, mental toughness, and endurance.
Yeah, those are all part of it. Yeah. Jorge, what do you think? You've taken the MCAT.
I agree with critical thinking. I think it's seeing something and then being able to synthesize or answer a question based on the knowledge you have.
Yeah. So after looking at all this, what I've come to realize is the MCAT, yes, it does evaluate a very specific skill. There are several ones. But I think what the main one is your ability to answer MCAT-style questions about a finite range of material at a specific pace. And you can break that down into 3 components. Your ability to answer MCAT-style questions about a finite range of material at a specific pace. So let's take the first one, MCAT-style questions. Would you believe me if I told you that there are MCAT-style questions? Yes? No? Yes. Well, you've been through that. You've been through the fire, yeah. So, yeah, so you would take my word that there are definite MCAT-style questions. Do you know how many? Tens, hundreds, thousands? Well, and do you know what they look like? No. You must have some idea. You must remember a little bit of what they look like.
I mean, I think there's certain types of questions.
Yeah.
There's standalone. I mean, it depends on the section, but I remember if it's a science section, there's standalone questions where they just ask you a question and you answer it.
Yeah.
And there's questions where it's passage-based, where you read a passage, and whether the information in the passage or not, they ask you a question relevant to the passage.
Yeah. So then, similar to like the AAMC or someone telling us, wouldn't it be nice if we knew what these MCAT-style questions were? if they told us what the styles were, and then it would make the studying for it that much. You still have to study. It's like climbing a mountain. It's hard regardless. It's long, it's hard, it's arduous, it's painful. But on top of that, it's like there's this forest, this thick forest in the way that you can't even figure out where the path is. And you might be just going around in circles and circles. But what if you had a clearing in that path? You would see it's still very long, it's still very hard, it's a lot of walking, uphill walking, but at least now you have some idea of which way to go. And yeah, it would be nice if they told us what these styles were. Well, you're going to figure them out. So imagine that they have an MCAT question building machine. And literally what they do is they take the material, the pre-med science curricula, and they just feed it into these machines, and out pops an MCAT style question. It really is this way. Like after you've been through this gauntlet, you realize this is how it works. And it's the same for step one. There are step one style question building machines. And these machines, they operate according to a very specific blueprint. Each one takes the material and sort of repackages it in a certain way over and over again, regardless of what that material is. And there's not just one, there are several. Here I'm just showing you 5 different ones, but there are more than that. And each one of them operates according to its own blueprint. So, and there are some are more common than others, some are more commonly used, some are more rare and special. That you're like, after doing thousands of questions, you're like, wow, I've never seen a question quite like that before. Well, but now you have. And there are other ones that you see over and over again because it's just one that they use very commonly. So what you can do is take one bit of material, like a passage on redox reactions that they use in industry, because they always have to have some context for that passage, and feed it into many different machines. And you get this one topic which you pop out all these different questions that look at that topic from many different angles. And you may not necessarily know what it looks like from all those different angles. You may have only experienced it from one angle. Like you may be able to answer the question that comes out of question building machine number 1 or machine number 2, but just because you know the material, like you've read it in content review books, does not guarantee that you'll be able to answer the question that came out of machines 3, 4, and 5. And just like that, you can have passages on all sorts of things that get fed into these machines. Or you can take many different kinds of ideas and passages and feed them into one machine. And so this is how they build up a cohort of questions. And they do build up a cohort of questions that they use, like consistent, like this is the block of questions we're using this year, and they cycle through them. And they develop more questions, and they cycle through them. And so all these weird different topics that they can think of, they all just get repackaged according to a certain way. And the more familiar you are with these question styles, the better you'll be at answering them correctly. So no, it sucks, they don't tell us what they are, but you will figure them out. And you figure them out by doing thousands of practice questions. So how many question building machines are there? 5,000? I would say, I don't have an exact number, but I would say it's more than you can easily, well, it's more than you can count on 2 hands. It's more than you can get by just doing a few questions, but it's few enough, it's fewer, or it's low enough such that after doing hundreds or thousands of questions, you will get a very good sense of what they are. You will start seeing them over and over again. You will see the signature, the tracer, or like the signature that is attached to each question style. And so you must be wondering, well, what are they like? So one example, we'll start from easy to hard. They give you a long passage, lots of detail, all sorts of info, numbers, relationships, graphs, and you're like, holy crap, like you just finished scrolling, reading through it, and you get to question number 1, and you realize, oh, there's no passage info needed. It's just some kind of like Gen Chem or physics problem, some manipulation, some numbers, and they give you all the info you need in the question, where it could be a standalone question. So if you realize that that's the case, sometimes you think, well, it might be better to just quickly read the question. If it's one of those questions, don't even bother going through the passage. You may have to go through the passage for other questions, but at least now, just do that question. So this is taken from a question bank that's available, that one prep company makes available for free. So hopefully I'm not infringing on copyright issues here, but it is freely available. And so they describe this whole thing about hypersaline body water, ocean water, and minerals in it, and lakes, and hydrologically isolated environments. And they give you these graphs, these curves of solubility, and the gas pressure vapor relationships. And the first question is, if a person drank a large quantity of hypersaline ocean water, the person could die because absorption of salt into the blood will cause it to become. And then so just knowledge of like how tonicity in the human bloodstream works and cells and all that stuff. You don't need any of the stuff they wrote in the passage to answer this. This just kind of like grabs some topics from the passage and whips it up into some shape. So this could be a standalone question. Similarly, they say water is a rare substance in that the liquid form, the frozen form, is less dense than the liquid form. Why is that? Well, it's just like a topic you learn in physics or chemistry. You don't need any of that passage stuff. And so if you just spot these right away, you can quickly like bang them out, and you don't have to even second guess yourself. That's the skill there. That's the skill you're developing, is not realizing that you don't have to second guess yourself to think, wait, do I need to go in the passage for these? Then, and then here, like this is from another one that I didn't want to just copy and paste. The basic gist is they get this long passage about skeletal muscle, and they tell you all sorts of things about slow twitch and fast twitch, and like the relationships of force of the muscles and lever, arm. They tell you something about how they use energy and aerobic and anaerobic metabolism. And the first question was, like, they phrased in a sense to essentially say which one of the following qualities is most associated with aerobic metabolism. It's also a standalone question, and they could say it that way. They could say it like least associated. And in the end, what they're actually asking is just which of these things in the answer choices belong to aerobic metabolism and which of them belong to anaerobic metabolism. You don't even need the in-muscle part. And they give you things like the relationship of pH, how and when the electron transport chain is used, relationship of glycogen, lactic acid buildup. And as long as you know that stuff, you can very easily answer that question. You don't need any of the passage stuff. So then, another type, where minimal passage info needed. Again, they have a super long passage, all sorts of distractors and disguises and makeup. And then it's also some kind of problem you need to work out, but you need one small part from the passage. Usually it's not too much of an issue, but every now and then you got to make sure you're picking out the right part. So here, that same ocean water thing, they ask, what's the approximate molarity of sodium chloride in ocean water if the density of ocean water is such and such? And you realize, well, it's just it's one of those calculations where if you have the molarity of sodium chloride, or if you have the molar mass of sodium chloride, and you have the density, and if you had the percent mass, you can figure that out. Well, they give you the percent mass in the passage, and so that's when it helps to like train your ability to skim this passage to quickly pick out, well, you know that if you know that in order to calculate that you need this extra piece of information, you can quickly zoom in on the passage to figure out, do they give it to you? And if not, then something else is up. Like there's something else that they're getting at, but they do. And so you just plug in that number, the 3.5 to the percent mass with the density, you get the number of moles and so forth, and you get the molarity. And look at the answer choices. They're somewhat similar, right? So these kind of look similar, but they're not. And these are off by just a factor of 10. And they're traps. They're essentially that if you just slip up one way or another in a small calculation, you'll get one of these, and you'll think it's the correct answer. Also, what's the chemical formula of gypsum? Who knows? But they tell you in the passage, gypsum is calcium sulfate. But we know what sulfates are. We know what sulfides are, what all those. And so you just, that's like some piece of knowledge you have to remember and retrieve from long-term storage about what it is, SO3 or SO4. Then they have these same long passages, and then they have these questions where some passage info is needed. And you usually need to combine several components from numbers, from graphs and things in the passage. And this is where it gets a little trickier because you need to make sure you pick out the right things. You need to watch out for, sometimes they have these qualifiers, like in this case of this redox reaction in this organism, we find this in the passage. And in the question they say, well, based on the passage, what would this relationship be? And then it's like, you could calculate that oftentimes very quickly, just you know those relationships, but you have to pick out the right things, and they'll have a table with results, and you got to pick out the right result they're referring to. So one passage about acids and bases in the stomach and showing you all these fancy graphs of transport ions and these pathways, and they tell you the Kas of different acids and how they get neutralized and titrated, and how you do these experiments. And then they ask you something like, what's the free energy change when the duodenum neutralizes acid if the temperature is changed to something? And so you need to know, like, you need to know the pHs of duodenum, of inside and outside the lumen, like on one side of the cell. And you got to pick those out from the passage. And usually they do provide them and sort of figure that out. But you need to And then beyond that, it's just this calculation. And then there are ones where you have a lot of passage info needed. These are also easy to spot because you realize that either you don't understand it or like you just know you're gonna have to read through the passage. And that's when, yes, you do have to like take your time or build up that skill of going through the passage to figure out like what clues you need to answer their question. So some are simple, some are more abstract, and they're more than this. The part where it gets really tricky is this, that some are way more insidious and complex. They have all these different levels of abstraction, of requiring you to pull info from different knowledge sources. And like you're saying, critical thinking is apply them to this thing where they just give you some information and put the onus on you. Did someone chat something? I just heard a beep. Someone puts the onus on you to pick out what information from the passage is needed. And so those, yeah, you do have to pay attention to them, and they each have their own flavors and styles of complexity and how much they ask of you to do. It's like now they're asking you to juggle 10 balls all at once. And doing lots and lots of questions, you will start to see how they string things together. So there was this one was pretty complicated, this passage about investigating a protein translation in bacteria using radioactive amino acid labeling, adding antibodies at certain points of the experiment with or without proteases. They had a graph of their results, and they had like hypotheses explaining. They said, well, hypothesis A says this, B and C say this. And one of their questions was, this is sort of rephrased to protect the question, but which of the following results of radioactivity, and they present different graphs of radioactivity, represent protection from protease destruction if one of the hypotheses is correct? And then I was like, oh crap. I was like, that's going to take a lot of time. You're going to have to really understand what the experiment did, what that amino acid labeling did, and like what the protease did, where it attacks, what amino acid residue, and then what the chopped up pieces will be, and how that affects the incorporation of those radioactive amino acids to like make it radioactive, a lot or a little. And that's all based on their hypothesis when they see what like one specific hypothesis they present. Another one was like if you had a ribosomal mutation that prevented incorporation of a specific amino acid into this translation, how would it be different? And so then you have to know like how these chains are forming. You need to know something about translation. You need to know what these amino acid residues look like, what their side chains look like. And you need to have some idea of how this ribosome works to pump things out and incorporate things and where that chain would be broken off. And so, yeah, some of them are just like, they are very complex. And it's like looking at, it's like you take a simple object and you disguise it so much that you can't even tell what the original object was. The only way you get good at that is by doing all these practice questions. They also have these other patterns where they take like A and B and 1 and 2, and they say, well, which of these is it combined? Is it in the presence of, well, it's sort of self-explanatory, but these combinations of A1, A2, or B1, B2, they have things like double negatives and least likely to be false and all sorts of wording to trip you up. But the more you experience that wording, the more you realize that that's code word for most likely to be true or whatever it ends up being. And about a finite range of material. So there's almost like a seemingly infinite amount of undergrad science material, curricula. From that, the AAMC, the people that make up the MCAT, they take a finite chunk. They have to, like they don't take an infinite amount. And from that, they feed all that stuff into their question building machines. So as you start cycling through these thousands of questions, you will get a sense of what this range of content is. It's almost like walking around the Earth. You start walking west, and assuming the Earth was all Earth and not water, it would just seem infinite. But eventually you come back up and you realize, oh, I made a circle. It's kind of like that. It's very large, but it is finite. And the more you walk and the more distance you cover, the more you will kind of have this bird's eye view to realize that, yes, it is finite. And I'm starting to now walk in circles and repeat some of the things I've seen. And the specific pace part. So someone was saying timing. If there was no clock, you'd probably do better on a lot of these questions. Yeah? If you had time to like retrieve all the components, think about it, mull it over. But no, when that time pressure is added, like you make mistakes, you tend to slip up. And like any manual skill that you're good at just doing leisurely And then as soon as someone tells you to do it faster, you get nervous and you drop things and you fumble around. And so that's a skill you have to develop too, is to be able to do these things at the pace that they require you to. Anybody know this image? No? Oh, come on. Anybody on the webcam know this image? Nobody? You're all too young for this? That's impossible.
Well, it's 'cause it lags a bit, so if
Okay.
you put it takes like 2 seconds for them to see it.
Okay.
Matrix.
Yes, The Matrix. So in the movie The Matrix, which is, I don't know, like 20 years old now. It was around before you were born, probably. There's this scene at the end when the protagonist has this moment of revelation. He lives in a world that's built by a computer, like in computer code, like a virtual world. And he has this moment of realization where he no longer sees the people and the buildings and the walls. It's almost like the outer layer, the skin layer, the superficial layer has been peeled away, and he sees the code that creates the whole matrix, that creates everything around him. And as you do these thousands of practice questions, you'll realize this. You'll start to see the architecture, and you'll realize that they only ask about certain things in certain ways over and over again. You will start to see the architecture of their questions, and you will like slowly peel away these layers, and you will see the matrix little by little. And most importantly, you will gain intimate familiarity with what they ask and how they ask it. That's an important distinction of how they ask it, because the content review, that prepares you for the what, but it does very little to prepare you for the how they ask it. The only way to get good at being familiar with how they ask it is by doing lots of practice questions. So other skills at the MCAT tests, yes, mental fortitude, concentration, stamina, resilience, focus, because like it's 7 hours long, like the 5th hour, you're drained. It's like if you haven't trained to do a 26-mile marathon, and you normally at best can run 5 miles, think of what you're going to be like at mile 15. You'll be dying, right? So you have to train for that. So it does take all those things into account. And then, like, let's say also this thing about mental fortitude, that you do your first block of chem and physics questions, and it feels very shaky. You're like, oh crap, I saw a lot of stuff that I never prepared for, and it really shakes your nerves. And you have to find a way to be prepared for that, so that if that happens, it doesn't ruin your confidence for everything else that comes downstream. And that's a very real thing that can happen. So all these are different skills you need to develop. How to develop them? Like, how do people develop skills? And if you look at people who study this stuff, because this stuff isn't studied in the MCAT world, they do study in the education world. So there's literature there, and they study a lot in like sports world, chess, musical performance, all these expert manual activities. Well, one of the better ways to develop a skill is through deliberate practice. And so you can just take those ideas and plot them right smack onto the MCAT. They lay on so nicely. Remember that thing I was saying, you have to get feedback? It has to be high quality feedback. That's one of the most important parts of all of this. If you don't get that feedback to figure out why you got it wrong and what you're going to do to lower the likelihood of getting it wrong, you're screwed. Like, there's no chance of like improving. There's very little chance of improving, because it's like you'll just be running over the same pothole again and again and again and never realizing it's there, so you got to sidestep it. And remember that feedback has to be these 3 things, and I'll explain why: timely, specific, and actionable. When you approach an MCAT problem, your mind goes through these different steps, the same way each time, over and over again. First thing, you need to gather ingredients. So you read the passage, read the question. You need to figure out what are the essential components I need from long-term memory to be able to do this. It's like if you're going to bake something, you go to the kitchen, you got to pull the right things out of the cabinet or the cupboard. You have to remember what the equations are you need, what the principles are you need. And then you have to remember, you have to pull up the reasoning processes, how you manipulate that information. And then you actually have to do the manipulation, carry it out. So you get your spices, your flour, and everything. You have to know how it's mixed together, how you let it set for a certain amount of time so it turns out right. You have to know what to set the oven to, and then actually how long to bake it for. Like, how vigorously do you mix something? And in the end, this doesn't really work with the baking analogy, but you have to answer their question. So oftentimes they will phrase their question, they'll throw in these little things in their question stem, such that if you didn't catch on to this one specific thing, it leads you down the wrong path. And what you will end up doing is you will gather the correct ingredients, you will pull up the right reasoning processes, you'll apply them correctly, so you'll apply the correct reasoning process to the correct ingredients, correctly, and you'll produce an answer that is technically true and correct, and it will be one of the answer choices, but it won't be the correct answer choice because it was like one little slip in the wording, that if you knew that or something from the passage, then you would have realized, oh, I have to do this thing or use this reasoning process or apply it in that way. Another way to look at these processes, these thought processes that you go through is, first thing, you got to pull up the content knowledge. You have to know how to manipulate that knowledge. Then you have to just do it, apply the formula, do the math, do the critical thinking of putting these things together, and then watch out for traps. Khan Academy knows this. Have any of you done their questions? The free Khan Academy questions? So those of you, and for like those of you on the webcam side who have done it, you might remember that they have these hints that they give you. That if you're not sure what it is, what the answer is, you can click get a hint. And they go in order. They have hint number 1. And hint number 1 usually gives you the ingredients. It tells you these are the things, basic things you're going to need to know to be able to have any chance at answering this question. You click hint number 2 if you still don't know, and that tells you this is in general like how you manipulate those ingredients. You're still not sure, you click hint number 3. It usually gives you some example of like, well, you can take this and apply it this way and you produce this way. And then usually by the time you get to hint number 4, sometimes this is also in hint number 3, they just give you the answer. They say, well, they take info from the passage and they say, well, in this passage, they had this amount of gas and pressure and volume. And if we use what we told you in hint number 2 and apply it to what we told you in hint number 1, you produce this. And usually they give you the answer right then and there. So they know the same thing too. You go through this every single time whether you realize it or not. Most of the time it's just very fast. But these are the things you're exercising. Every time you encounter a question, you have to pull these things from long-term memory. That's a skill that you have to get better at. You have to know how to manipulate them. That's a skill that you can get better at in practice. And so for all these different steps, and they are a stepwise process, if you get any one of them wrong, you're not going to get the right answer. If you like pull up the wrong ingredients to bake a pie, the pie's not going to come out right. If you're making macaroons and you don't let it sit the right amount for the batter to settle in the way it needs to settle, my partner makes macaroons. Then it's not going to come out right. If you don't set the oven at the right temperature or cook it for the right amount, it's not going to come out right. And so any one of these, or if in the MCAT thing, if you don't answer their specific question, you're going to get the wrong. So a mistake in any one of these will produce a wrong answer. And it's really helpful to figure out which one of these went wrong, because that's what creates your actionable target. So let's see if this works. I just wanted to show you some Khan Academy examples. Our internet is very slow.
It's also just, it slowly projects on your screen on ours. It lags it.
Okay. Does the voice lag though? Because that might be a little.
I want to ask because I have my phone.
Oh, does my voice lag? Like, does it seem like what I say is not in tune with the slides? Because that would kind of suck.
No, voice is fine.
Great. So let's see. I'm trying to remember. You all here. But these are all free. That's nice of them. All the Khan Academy stuff is free, or almost all of it is free. Here, this is going to take a while, so we can come back to this because I can show you other examples. But this was a question from one of the question banks. A tissue sample, and you don't really need the question stem. The passage talked about cooling liquid nitrogen and how you make it and the process involved and like heat transfer and all this garbage. And so their question, a tissue sample at 275 Kelvin submerged in 2 kilograms of liquid nitrogen at 70 Kelvin for cryopreservation. So the thing is much warmer than the liquid nitrogen. When they equilibrate, they don't tell you that, but the final temperature of nitrogen is 75 Kelvin. What's the heat capacity of the sample? And assume that no heat is lost to the environment. So, well, first you need to gather the ingredients. You need to know how specific heat and heat capacity work. What are the formulas that interrelate those? If you don't know that, it's really hard to do anything else, right? So you got to remember that equation. And you got to remember that you can manipulate in certain ways, so you're going to rearrange it to find something. And you're going to realize that either from the question stem or from the passage, you can pick out these different variables that you need to plug in. And then you need to apply correctly. So look at the answers they give you. They give you 50 and 0.05, 0.1 and 100. They're sort of similar, but they're off by a factor of 10 or 100 in each case, right? So meaning that if you goof up in these numbers calculation just a little, you're going to get it wrong. Whether, let's say you forgot to convert back to joules per Kelvin instead of you left it as kilojoules per Kelvin or something like that. Or if in using the kilograms, you forgot that you're using kilograms, and so you got to convert back to grams because what you end up doing is just plugging these numbers to get the like the specific heat of the nitrogen. And you figure out like there's 5 degrees Kelvin transferred when they equilibrate, so both are 75. So you know how much the thing lost, how much heat the object lost, and you can apply all that stuff back in the same equation to figure out what was its own specific heat and heat capacity. And then they set up a trap for you that if you don't realize that there's a difference between using specific heat and heat capacity, which kind of sound similar and they are sort of very much related, and depending on how the numbers work, they might actually be the same number. But if you don't realize the distinction, you're going to choose the wrong answer. You're going to produce one of these other wrong answers, and you're going to pick it. And so this, I swear, so how do I know this? Because I'm doing practice questions. I'm doing on UWorld, MCAT, on Next Step, on AAMC, and it really is all this stuff. And most of the time, you're not conscious about it. But boy, it really helps to do it more intentionally, to actually be aware, because then you can hone in on what went wrong. Like you realize, okay, I don't need to review all that specific heat capacity stuff. Like I know those formulas, I know how they're manipulated. I just made this simple goof math error, or I didn't pay close enough attention to that it was joules per Kelvin and not something else. And so that's with that feedback. So timely. You do the block of practice questions, you have to review them pretty shortly thereafter, because you have to remember what were the thought processes that you went through in order to produce the answer you did. If you forget them, the feedback you're going to get is much lower quality and much less useful in terms of making you better at that skill. Because if you don't remember where you went wrong, how are you going to figure out what you need to fix? Yeah.
So can you give us an example of what's a good timely way of reviewing it? Would it be that same time, like that same day, the next day?
That same day. So let's say you do a block of 20 questions and you time yourself, and I'll talk about that, how you do that block in a little bit. Take a short break, 10, 15 minutes, and then review it right after that. Like, so that same, I wouldn't save it for the next day. I would just kind of do it right then and there because it's freshest in your mind. Just think of examples in sports. So if you're learning to play tennis, you start from the basics of like how to swing. And it's hard for you to pick out like how you swing because it's hard to see yourself, but you have a coach that watches you. Suppose that coach watches you like take several swings and sees all these mistakes you're making. And then a few days later tells you, hey, when you were making those swings, your arm was cocked a little this way or that way. Well, how the hell is that going to help you? Because you don't remember what it was like that your arm was like. But if right then and there, after you make that swing, they say, no, they stop you. Your arm should be like this or like that. Then you can consciously make that choice next time to do that. But if it doesn't happen right then and there, it's very hard for that feedback to be effective. That's why it needs to be timely.
Jessica has another question. So that kind of works for like a short block of questions.
Mm-hmm.
What if you're taking a full length?
Yeah. So that is an issue because after 7 hours, you're not in good condition to learn from that. So what I would probably do is review half of it that same day, like take a longer break, like I don't know, maybe like an hour or so, but review half of it that same day and the other half the next day. And preferably the half that you review that same day would be focused on all the ones you got wrong. Let's say I would skip over the ones I got right and just go to wrong, even if I just skip over ones, and then the next day review the other half. Yeah, because so practice exams, they are helpful for learning them, for getting better at that skill, but they're also helpful for other things. And they do have the downside of exactly that it's so mentally draining that you're not in good condition to actually learn from it afterwards.
One more question. So Jessica Chavez asked, do you review everything after you've studied for a certain block period, like 4 hours or 5 hours? Or do you review in between of your, you include the review part of your study block?
In each, you mean like after each question? So I think what you're asking is, do I like do a question and then review it? Do a question and then review it?
I guess the question is, how big of a block should you practice questions in? I think that's the question you're asking.
Yeah. I would say no less than 10 or 15, probably no less than 15. And especially when starting out, no more than 30 or 40. Okay. You will build stamina and endurance as you go on because you're going to have to be able to be comfortable doing a block of 59 questions because that's what you have to do, and then 53 for cars. But at first, just 15 to 40. Because it's enough time that you actually get a couple passages. If you do 5 questions, they're going to be all isolated ones. They're not going to be part of the passage. Most of the MCAT is passage-based, so you have to do passage-based questions. So if you set your thing for 15 questions, you're probably going to get 2 passages, at least 1. And then from there on, just if you do more than 40, especially early on, the same thing is going to happen. You're going to be tired. It's mentally draining. You're not going to be able to focus and remember what were these different steps that your mind went through. Like and once you start thinking about it a little more intentionally, you will realize, like, yeah, crap, I didn't remember that, or I pulled up the wrong one, and that led me down this whole wrong path. Or I knew the right material, and I didn't really remember how you manipulated exactly in this situation. And so if you are able to identify, that timely part, doing it shortly thereafter, so you can remember which one of these went wrong, and that's the specific part, identifying which one went wrong. Because if you do that, that allows you to create an actionable target, meaning it will tell you what you need to do to fix it afterwards, to lower the likelihood of making the same mistake. Now, some are easier to fix than others. Content knowledge, for example. If you learn something and forgot it, or you never learned in the first place, it's like this missing hole. It's really hard to do the rest of them. So you just got to go back and review that. And that's where the review books can be very helpful. Just like focused reviewing of things that you discovered were missing holes in your fund of knowledge. The other ones are a little more complex to fix. And for most of them, there's no easy way, like thing that you can do, like a separate isolated activity. And actually the activity to get better at them is to do more questions, because that's how they will be presented in a way that's how that skill of manipulating knowledge will be presented to you. It's kind of like if you're a boxer, you practice like on the bag thing, you practice push-ups, you practice developing your that muscle because that's what you use for punching. And you could do that separately. You don't need to punch someone to develop that. You could do isolated strengthening exercises. For music, when you practice your scales, or you can practice an isolated section of the piece. It's really hard to do that in this case. It's really hard to have something that recreates what it feels like for step 2, to have to manipulate that knowledge. And so one of the best ways to do it is in this framework of questions, because they already have that built into them.
One more question from Jessica Chavez. I make a lot of mistakes. Should I have a full day devoted to reviewing all the mistakes I made in the past 2 weeks into a single day, or should I make this a day-to-day thing where I review what mistakes I made that day?
I'd probably stick more to closer to the latter, where you review on a more frequent basis, because it helps it stick better. It doesn't necessarily have to be the same day, and you will start to get that will be different. That will vary from person to person, but on average, I think it's better to do it shortly thereafter. At first, you're going to get a lot of questions wrong. Like, there's no 2 ways about it, and so you're going to have a pile of stuff to review, and you may not be able to get to it quick enough, so it will spill over to the next week or so, and that's fine. But if you purposely just wait 2 weeks to build up all this stuff, it's not as helpful, because it may be that in those 2 weeks, you're doing more practice questions. You encountered another question similar to it, but you didn't do the kind of like the learning that needed to give you a better shot at not getting this one wrong, and you still got it wrong for the same reason. And so that's why it can be helpful to review sooner, either that same day or the next day. That can wait till the next day or the day after, like when you have bulk of time to do that review. And so this content knowledge thing, it's an easy one to fix because you just go back and review, but it's also an easy one to get hung up on. And it's one that people do get hung up on. And sometimes people will have the tendency to think that it's because I didn't learn these topics that I got these questions wrong. That may be true, but not necessarily. Because if you don't have that content knowledge, then it's really hard to progress to those other steps. So yeah, you probably will get it wrong. But maybe you did learn those topics, but you didn't learn them in the way that you needed to for this type of activity. And so that having that content knowledge doesn't guarantee you're going to be able to do these other ones. It doesn't guarantee you'll be able to do step 2 or step 3 or step 4. That's only the first part. And so you wonder, how much content knowledge review do I really need? And well, that's a good question, because a lot of people get hung up on having a lot of content knowledge review. Do you want to take a short break?
Sure. Are there any burning questions before we take a break?
Okay. Everybody back? But yeah, so how much content knowledge review do you need? Because sometimes people worry and they think, well, I need a lot. This kind of charts out the benefit that you get from time spent on reading content review books. As time goes on, the correlation to your exam score. Early on, it is very helpful, because if you haven't taken this stuff in a while or it's just not fresh in your mind, it really helps to see it at least once. But later on, that benefit you get in terms of raising your exam score really plateaus out, and it's not worth your time. Another way to look at this, to graphically represent this, is if you look at this graph here. On the x-axis, you have time, starting from the start of your MCAT study period, whatever that is, all the way up to exam day. On the y-axis, you have your study time proportion, so how much of your time, study time, that you're devoting to one activity or another. And when you start out, most people will start out doing a lot of reading, like reading a Kaplan book or a Princeton review book, an MCAT book. And as time goes on, they read less and less because they start doing practice questions. And then you'll notice practice questions here, it doesn't really hit 100% because you are still doing some reading at that time by the time exam day comes. The other thing I want you to notice is just this spot here, this point where you're doing spending about 50% of your time reading and 50% of your time doing practice questions. I think this kind of strategy, doing it this way, does you a disservice. And I would strongly recommend doing something that looks a little more like this, where now that halfway point of where you're spending half your time reading and doing practice questions happens earlier on in your training period. And a few other things happen, you'll notice. Down here, you start doing questions right at the beginning of your study, like right from day one. You don't need to do a lot. You spend most of your time doing reading and content review, but you do start doing questions. And then probably most importantly, over here, you will hit a point in your training period when you are doing nothing but questions. You're not really spending much, if any, time on reading content review books. So your question, now that I have you here, your question was, are these periods roughly divided into thirds, like for 3-month study period into 1 month, 1 month dot, month 2 dot, and then test day? Well, that's not so easy to answer. So you're wondering, like here, let's say if you divide this into thirds, you have a third here and a third here, and I'm saying that you should do something more like this, where you have a third here and a third here. I think the actual amount you divide it matters less, like if it's like a specific third or quarter or whatever, but just realizing that you need to have, I would strongly recommend having this trend where well, this is a solid point that you start doing questions from the very beginning, and at some point, maybe a month or so before your exam, because this period may be something like 9 months or 6 months. That varies from person to person, or 3 months or 2 months. But whatever that is, this time period here, when you're just doing practice questions, I would try to aim for such that your last month of prep, that you're able to free up time so that you have this 1 month of like dedicated time where you treat this as your full-time job. I know that's hard for some people, but as much as you can do it, like plan to take it like after your semester ends, or if you're able to take a short break from your job, something so that you can really devote most of the day to this for 1 month, and that's when you're doing this. And it could be that for some people, this earlier period, this whole thing ends up being, let's say, 6 months, because 4 of those months you're in a semester and you have other classes to juggle, and so this is not really as intense as it could be. Then that semester ends and you really start to ramp things up. So But even then, regardless, just that, whatever study time you have, and I'll show you more why I think this is, that you get a lot more benefit from doing practice questions than from reading. I guess the main point is I don't want you to get so hung up on whether this should be a third or what exactly. And so now you asked, what about if I'm retaking the test, like restudying, what should the graph look like? If you're retaking the test, I would actually just do practice questions because you've already done some kind of training early on that included some kind of content review. You've seen the actual exam. If I was retaking the test, and I'm more than happy to talk afterwards with anyone here through email or chat or however, just after this is done tomorrow or at some point in the near future, individually. But yeah, if you're retaking the exam, if it was me, I would just do practice questions because you're already at that like final stage when you're doing that very focused training. Yeah, but Jessica Chavez, we can talk about that later or afterwards. Yeah, and so remember how I was saying that MCAT tests something you can do and not just something you know? Well, the reading, it really teaches you the know part. It's pretty good at that. It teaches you knowing it from one point of view. But doing the practice questions, that teaches you the do part, how to do the do part. And it also gives you some of the know along the way. It's not just the do, it's like a 2-for-1. So some people wonder, like, what if I don't have enough content knowledge to begin with? I'm just going to get all the questions wrong. No, that's not such a bad thing. I want you to go into it thinking that, yes, you will get a lot of the questions wrong. And that's what's supposed to happen. You're not supposed to get them right, especially at the beginning. And it's actually a good thing to get them wrong. This article came out in the New York Times not too long ago, why flunking exams is actually a good thing. It's short, it's kind of interesting, but what it does is it pulls together a lot of old and recent literature, just in a very easy to digest way, about why getting things wrong is good, why getting things wrong is actually very helpful for memorization and for doing better on tests. And so they come up with this phrase that you should, take tests to study rather than study to take tests. That in taking the tests, you are studying, you are training your mind to do the thing that the test asks you to do. And so when you do these practice questions early on, you're not going to have all the content knowledge you need. And you will get them wrong. But that's how you will learn from them, from the ones you get wrong. They will stick better. Like most of the time, the things you get wrong and things you do wrong in life, they tend to stick better than all the successes you've had because they leave a little bit of scar tissue. And the more painful the experience, the harder it sticks. So it's actually, you'd want each wrong question to be as painful as it could be and create a little bit of scar tissue, and then it would really stick. And they also mentioned this concept of a fluency vaccine. So a fluency vaccine, where they say when we read something, we like read the book in our psychology class, we highlight, sorry about that. Just plugged in a phone.
Oh, just cancel it.
No memories. Delete those. Sorry about that, folks. You got a very quick glance at a playlist.
Well, now they're seeing it because it's lagging.
Yes. I hardly ever use iTunes. So you develop this sense of fluency, or actually it's a false sense of fluency with the material. You think you know it, but actually you don't. And so what testing yourself does is it works as a vaccine against that fluency. So spending too much time on this content review, it really does give us a false sense of security that we actually know the material. You may know the material, but you can't manipulate it in the ways that you're required to. And so that testing and failing and those practice questions, they act to protect you from that false sense of fluency. From one of the internet forums, just copy pasted, someone said, hey guys, I did my first full length yesterday and I got a 496 on the diagnostic demo, the Princeton Review MCAT. I felt so defeated afterwards, and I felt like I didn't even understand the passages or what the questions were asking. Well, it's hard, it's demoralizing to like get a 496 and you're thinking, how the hell am I gonna get up to whatever number I need to get up to? And it is demoralizing, but what if you went into it knowing, fully expecting that that's the score you should get? Then maybe it wouldn't be so bad. And I would urge you to think that, yes, go into it knowing you will fail, that you will get many of them wrong, and that's okay. because the point is not to get them right, especially early on. The point is to figure out why you got them wrong. So I used to work in like a science lab, like a wet bench science lab, and with the postdocs, the advice they would tell you, it's like molecular bio experiments, pipetting DNA and all that crap. And these experiments never work out the first time. They rarely work out the second, third, or fourth time. It takes a while to fine tune them. And so what they would say is the first time you run an experiment, the goal is not to get results, good results. The goal is to figure out all the ways this could possibly go wrong, because it will go wrong. And if you're not paying attention to it, you'll have no chance of fixing it for the second and third time. And it's only after you expect these mistakes and errors, you know it's going to have to be fine-tuned. And only then, once you've attuned your mind to pick up those errors, now you can fix them. Now you can wait for results. And it's very similar. Go in knowing that you're going to bomb, and that's okay. That's very much expected. I mean, how could you? Like, when a baby starts walking, you don't expect it to immediately start walking. No, it's going to get a 300 on its first demo MCAT Prep test. Another common reaction is this. I did my first full-length practice exam, and I did horribly. I'm going to go back and do more content review before restarting questions. And I would strongly urge you to, to not do that. So it's kind of like saying, I really sucked in the soccer game today. I'm going to go back and learn about more soccer theory, as opposed to like practicing the individual skills. I'm going to go watch Pelé and see his old moves and watch Maradona and so forth. And yeah, no, you don't like go retreat back to the theory stuff. You practice the skill that you have to actually execute. Reading is not the skill you have to. Reading like the Kaplan review book, you don't go to MCAT test day. You don't sit down in front of a Kaplan review book and read it and highlight it. No, you do the questions. So you practice the activity you will be doing. And like the baby example, also like no one in their right mind would tell the baby, oh, you failed on your first few tries. That's it. Walking is not for you. Just give up, you know. Like, no, people know the baby's going to fail, and they just let him fail. And they know that the more the baby fails, the more she will keep getting up and learning what it feels like to fail and how to gain stability and hold on to things, and little by little she does it. But like, why is it not any different for learning this skill?
There's two questions I think that relate to this. One was by Kenya, and she's asking, when she's reviewing, should she pair doing passage-based questions with content at the same time? She says that on exam crackers, they have the content paired along with passages as well. Is that a good strategy to do both at the same time?
Yeah, it doesn't hurt. What I would not do, so some of these review books, what they do is they'll have the chapter and they review whatever like stoichiometry stuff in chemistry, and then they have a few practice questions at the end, maybe one passage or two, or even freestanding questions just to test yourself on the material. That I would not do. You can still do them. I'm not saying don't do them, but I wouldn't count that as the rigorous thing of doing practice questions. It really means like separate from the content review. You can use them if you can gather enough of them, like let's say 2 or 3 passages at once. But you do them, you take a short break, 15 minutes, and then review the answer explanations. Hopefully there are good answer explanations, which can help you identify why you got them wrong. So it's not a problem. The only way I foresee it could be a problem is if it's the situation where it's the chapter and just a few questions at the end. It's much better if it's just its own dedicated block. Some books have that, some books don't.
And there's one more question. Is it normal to allot double the amount of time taken to read a passage initially, or should they practice with the time that they have for the exam? Should they build their
Both. So I'll talk about that timing because that's a very important thing. I'll talk about it. I have a whole set to talk about that. But yeah, both actually is the short answer to that. Yeah. So in like running a marathon, like, can you run a marathon? How much can you run? A mile? Yeah, me at best a mile. Like I'll be dying after 2-3 miles, like at best. And so what if someone told you, hey, you got to run a marathon? You're not going to run straight to 26 miles, right? You're just going to work up. And if you go out and run and you come back panting, like, oh, I made it to 1.5 miles. And like someone says, wow, you did pretty horrible. Like, I don't think this is for you. No, you're expected to not do well early on. And so doing poorly on these early tests should only encourage you to do more practice questions and not abandon them in favor of doing more reading content review. Having that thought, I think of like, I did bad on executing this, so I'm going to go back and read so that I can execute it better. It doesn't work like that, and that will do you a disservice. And unfortunately, that gets ingrained in people because that's a lot of how our education system is in the US. But don't do that. You fail on these, you know you're supposed to fail on them, just like you can't run a marathon from day one, and you go back, you rest, and you practice the skill. The next day you go out and you run your 1.5 miles, and the next day you run 1 3/4 miles. This word yet. Anybody know who Carol Dweck is? Heard that name? So Carol Dweck is a psychologist, a researcher, actually here at Stanford, and she's devoted her career to studying this thing called the growth mindset. She wrote this great book called Fixed Mindset, Growth Mindset, and it's just describing how by a change of mindset, people are able to achieve things that they didn't think they were able to achieve. I won't talk too much into it, other than to say this word yet is very powerful, and it's a large part of what she studied. Like, she actually studied this with people, like telling them to add on the word yet. So when you tell yourself, I can't get these MCAT questions right because I'm stupid, because I suck, because I didn't learn biochem, I failed orgo, or whatever, I can't get them right, becomes, I can't get these MCAT questions right yet, but you will. I can't run this marathon yet, but you will. You're not supposed to get them right now, but you will. And that word yet can be very powerful. Remember I was telling you how it's asking you to realize, or this is what one thing I want you to do is to realize that the MCAT test is something you can do and not just something you know? Well, doing practice questions gives you the do, and it also gives you the know. A reading content review pretty much only gives you the know, so it gives you something, but the potential downside of putting too much of your efforts into that reading content review is it can give you the false impression that you're also able to do when you actually aren't. And so doing the practice questions really does give you a 2-for-1. And so now you might be wondering, are you saying I shouldn't read review books? Well, yes and no. There is a time and place for them. But I just want you to realize that reading them by themselves guarantees very little. It doesn't guarantee you'll be able to do well in the exam. I don't know, it guarantees that you will have read the material and highlighted whatever you highlighted or taken notes. That's all it is. Nothing more than that. It will guarantee that you can check off the box that I read chapters 3 and 4. Someone had this comment or this thought that they said, the MCAT tests broadly, and no matter how many questions I've done, I still don't know if I've covered everything. And if I just can review all the material, I'll at least have a safety net, because I'll at least know that I'll have covered everything. And I don't think that's exactly true. I think that statement can also get you into some trouble. It's true the MCAT tests broadly, and it's true that you may have done lots of questions and you still may not have covered everything. But covering everything by doing the content review type of covering still won't guarantee that you can do well in the exam, and this is why. Imagine you have these 2 buckets, right? You have your content knowledge bucket, and you need to fill it up, and as you fill it up, that does translate to getting a better MCAT score, a better exam score. And the thought is that, well, if I just keep filling up my content knowledge bucket, that will little by little fill up my exam score. And if I could just fill up, like cover everything, like read all those Kaplan books front to back, know them inside and out, that it will help me translate that to a good exam score. Well, what you don't realize is that there's actually an intermediary in this little reaction equation here. And that's this MCAT skill that I keep talking about. And so your content knowledge, you build that up, it helps you develop the MCAT skill, but it turns out that MCAT skill is what correlates so much more closely with your final exam score, your exam outcome. And so what I want you to avoid is the mistaken belief that if I just build up my content knowledge, I'll be able to do well, because building up your content knowledge does not necessarily, it doesn't actually do much to build up the MCAT skill. And if your MCAT skill is low, your exam score is low. So avoid this situation. What you do is build up that MCAT skill. Now, it's true, you do need some content knowledge to be able to carry out that MCAT skill. It's very hard to do without the content knowledge. But it's that MCAT skill, actually, like in all these chemistry reactions, you have the intermediate product that leads to the final thing in these transition points. And that is there. Like, that's the key point in the middle that allows you to translate the content knowledge into a good exam score. And so let me ask you, like, how do you develop the content knowledge? Yeah, read, exactly. Yeah, you read the content review books. How do you develop the MCAT skill? Yeah, exactly. Doing lots of questions. Yes, yes. I'm being repetitive, hopefully, so that it sticks better. But, but yes, doing lots of questions, getting them wrong, getting the feedback that happens shortly thereafter that specifically identifies why you got it wrong, and that allows you to create an actionable target so you can lower the likelihood of getting it wrong. But the books don't help develop the MCAT skill. They really don't. I promise you that they really don't.
There's a good question. Jessica Chavez asked, is if there's a leak in your content knowledge container that lets liquid seep through, what do you do?
Well, so meaning that you're forgetting things.
Yeah.
You read things and you forget things. So you may wonder, well, I should review them and read them and reread them to kind of fill it back up and hope that the hole kind of patches itself somehow. So there are two things. One, you gotta have a hole, and two, you gotta fill it back up with that particular item. There's tons of literature, like research in the education field, showing that what we do, what we're taught to do, the act of like reading, highlighting, even taking notes, it's not very good for memorizing. It's very, what they call passive learning. Even for as much as you try to make it active learning, it's still not very active. And it turns out that actually testing yourself on it is probably the strongest way you can turn it into active learning. And so if it keeps falling out, well, so you have to refill it. I would argue that it's better to refill it by forcing yourself to experience having to do that recall through an answer, through a practice question, failing, getting it wrong because you couldn't remember it, and then reading it in the answer explanation. So it's key to go over the answer explanations. When you read that answer explanation and it tells you, oh, you didn't remember this fact, this is what you needed, that is content review. And it's much better to read it in that setting of having gotten a question wrong, feeling the pain of it being wrong, and then reading it there, as opposed to reading it in Kaplan review book number 3, chapter whatever, this is the fact about that. Because you'll read kind of the similar statement in both areas, but if it's housed in the environment of the practice question, it sticks so much better and has so much more of a chance of actually sticking. And in terms of patching up that hole, those holes happen because of the passive learning thing. So if you're learning through whatever you end up filling up the content knowledge bucket with, if you fill it up through this other method of like of getting it wrong, failing to retrieve it, trying again, like the baby falling down, getting up, falling down, getting up, it tends to stick a lot better. So do any of you speak another language? Do you speak another language? Do you speak another language? Okay. Do you speak another? Are these other languages native to you? Like you kind of learn them as kids? Do you speak any other language besides that? Have you had to learn a language? Okay. When did you learn English? How'd you learn it? It's also a skill. And it's also a skill that develops so much better by practicing it, by being immersed in it, than actually reading in books. You can like read these like text, learning a language textbooks till the cows come home. But it's not until you actually start practicing it, getting it wrong and recorrecting that you are actually able to burn it into your head, what it is you need to say, how to pronounce it, all that stuff. Okay, that's just common knowledge. Like the best way to learn a language is to go and be like force yourself to be immersed in there, and you're going to learn it much better than if you sit in French class in high school and read your French book. Yeah, even if you like, okay, I'm going to go to France and Paris, and I'm going to have a great time with my partner, and I'm going to learn some French. It's still hard. It's still so much harder than practicing with someone, because that doing helps it stick so much better. Yeah, and so the doing practice questions, it also actually works quite well for building up your content knowledge. Doing the thing of realizing, well, I didn't gather the ingredients, or I mixed up my reasoning process, I didn't apply it correctly, or I got tripped up by one of their traps. All that, every time you do it and slip up and fall down and redirect a little, all that helps you get better and make that content knowledge stick more. Just like the baby falling and getting up, you don't like tell the baby like the theory about walking, they just kind of do it. And why is that? Why is it that the content review books fail us so miserably? Give any thought? That's one reason, yeah.
What was the reason?
Well, I'm wondering, like, why is it that they fail
It's
us?
just, I don't think they heard the passive, and someone just wrote passive.
Yeah.
Comments.
Yeah, that is part of it. So let me ask you this. What is this thing?
Right mouse.
Yeah. Well, how else would you describe it? Square, yeah. No, it's actually not a square.
3D.
It's this thing. What's that? Yes and no.
Triangular prism.
It's not actually that. It's this thing. But yeah, exactly right.
Oh, I see.
It's that.
Oh,
It's that. And I showed it to you from the front and then turned it 90 degrees and showed it to you from the side. But this is exactly what happens when you read these in your bio classes and almost all of education. Like when you're reading these content review books, they present the information to you in one way, in one facet. They present it to you as the square, but they don't give you any practice in what it feels like to look at it from the triangle side and to force you to realize, oh, yeah, that's actually the same thing. They just turned it a little way. That's what happens in your science courses. When you take bio and chem, they teach you the material in a certain way from a certain angle, and then the practice questions in the book, they're also from sort of similar angles, but what the professor will do is they'll like turn the topic 90 degrees and present it to you from this angle. You've rarely seen it presented. And that's what they want. They want you to make the mental jump that, oh, this is actually the same thing we learned, just from a different angle. And so those content review books, they present it to you from these one-sided things, and they give you very little practice on what it feels like to be tricked and have these things disguised, to actually see them, to be able to kind of manipulate them in your mind of what these topics look like. And it's the practice questions that show you those topics from many different angles. Those different angles are the question building machines. They take one topic and they feed it into the machine, it pops that out, presented from this angle. Takes the same topic, pops it out, presented from a different angle, from a different angle, from a different angle. That's why if you just read the review book and you feel pretty confident about it, you may be able to answer it when they ask you from like the square face, but you will not be able to answer when they ask you from the triangle face, from the side. So the timing thing, someone asked about like, how do you do that? And how do you get better is like, do you time yourself? Do you try to do it right away? Do you go leisurely? You need to work at the edge of your comfort zone. So you can't make too big a jump, you can't make too small a jump, but you have to constantly be a little uncomfortable. And this is what it looks like. So similar setup where you have on the x-axis your study period from the start of your MCAT study prep to the exam day. On the y-axis you have your speed, like just in minutes per question. And like for the science section, it's 59 questions in 95 minutes. So it's 1.6 minutes per question on average, including passage reading and all that stuff. And I would argue you need to do it a little bit faster than that. If you do it at 1.5, an average of 1.5 minutes a question, it gives you some time left over to review, like literally 4 minutes to review things you were not sure about. So for some people, this isn't an issue. They could just do it. But for a lot of people, it is. They can't do it on time. They can't finish it on time. And one thing you can do is you do a few blocks of practice questions, let's say 3 blocks. You time yourself. You don't try to hit a particular target. You just do it not too slow, not too fast. Like, do it not so fast that you're pressing yourself too much, but don't like take all day. And you average that number. So let's say you did 3 and your average for that, for each of those 3 together was 3.6 minutes per question. That was your speed. And now you got 60% correct. You need to get down to this line down here of 1.5 to be good and ready for the exam. And so let's say you try to jump straight to there. And what's going to happen? And you're going to be stressed out, yeah, and?
You're going to get them all wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Your proficiency will drop dramatically. Yeah. So just like if you can run 1 mile, they ask you to run 26. You're going to be in terrible shape. You're not going to finish in good time. The speed will drop dramatically, all that stuff. So you can't do that. It doesn't work that way. Instead, what you do is you start forcing yourself to go a little bit faster. So now you set the timer and you're going to do 3.4 minutes per question. Now you specifically are aiming to hit that target. So let's say you do 10 questions, you have 34 minutes to do them, to read the passages and answer the questions. And as you do them, your proficiency may drop some, but it's not going to drop that much. And as you get better at then with the in like 3 to 5, however many blocks of practice questions you do at that speed, your mind will start learning all the mental gymnastics you have to go through to work just a little bit faster, to go through the passages just a little quicker, to pick out the information a little bit faster, more agile, to retrieve the information, to like gather ingredients a little bit faster. But you can't do that if you make that huge jump. And you do it sort of until you kind of get your proficiency back up to the same level it was. And then you make another small jump. Now you go to 3.2, and you do a few more blocks like that, and so forth, and you go to 2.8. And you keep going little by little, just slightly faster, and you get more comfortable. But as soon as you get comfortable, then you have to go faster. You can't stay comfortable for too long. And it really helps to track it out like this, to graph it out, because here you can see this person didn't make it in time. By the time exam day came, they were only able to really do it at 2 minutes a question, so they didn't finish their test. And so when you are timing it, you're doing many more than that. So you're doing each one of these dots is a block of practice questions. You're doing many of them. So there are many dots. You're doing them frequently and regularly. And tracking them allows you to see, well, is my trajectory going to get me there in time? And you really do want to get down to the 1.5 a little bit before your exam hits, so that you are comfortable, or as comfortable as you could be in the time you have at that speed. And your particular trajectory might look like this, or maybe you start out faster and it looks like this, but regardless of what it is, it really helps to track it to make sure that you get down to that 1.5 before your exam hits, so you have some time to train at that speed. And so let's say you're doing them, you're cracking away, and you get to 1.5 and you try that, and all of a sudden your proficiency drops. You're doing okay, but now at this new speed, it's a barrier you can't seem to break. So you go a little bit slower, back to 1.6, 1.7, and you do a little bit better, and you try it again to go down to 1.5, and you fail again. It's like the plateau that you can't break through. One thing you can do is force yourself to do a few sets of questions, even faster, like 1.3 minutes per question. You're not going to get a lot of them right, but that's not the point. The point is to have you experience what it feels like now to go really fast, to force your mind to like even faster have to pick out these items, read the passages, read the questions, understand the question stem, immediately identify this is something I don't need the passage for, or this is something I definitely need the passage for. And once you do that, and then you go back to 1.5, your mind is now a little bit better equipped to do those mental gymnastics to be a little bit faster. And now it's a lot easier to do to maintain your proficiency. And like this is something you use in sports all the time. Like, what do you think the world record is for push-ups?
Like without stopping?
Yeah, like let's say like in a 24-hour period.
Oh, in a 24-hour period?
Yeah.
1,000 something.
1,000? Okay, that's more than that.
Someone on the chat said 2,000.
It's more than that. Right? This is mind-blowing. Like 10,000. This Japanese guy. 10,000, 24 hours. Like, how the hell does anybody do that? I can barely do 50 at best. I'm dying by 35. And so, but little by little, just working slightly. So you can, let's say I do 35 today, and I like by 36, I can't. My muscles are so fatigued that I'm falling. I literally cannot push myself up. Well, you can give yourself a little handicap or a little crutch. You go on your knees. Now you can do that 36th push-up. You can squeeze out just a little bit more each time. You squeeze out just a little bit more each time.
So that's a good, there's a question on here that I think ties in a lot with that.
Mm-hmm.
It says they're working on timing and they feel good with 3.4 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure what it means. They feel good with a certain amount on
Yeah.
hard passages, but when they do easier, well, they don't feel good with hard passages.
Yeah.
Once they get to the easier ones, the time feels right. I guess their question is, how rigid are they supposed to be with their timing, depending on the level of difficulty of the content?
I would say, well, first of all, in that scenario, is that person able to choose the level of difficulty? Like in whatever question bank they're using, can they choose easy, medium, or hard questions?
I would think so. I think what they're mentioning is the passage hard for them. Oh, no, this is no.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so. I didn't think
Okay.
like they had that. But yeah, it's like you encounter passage that is
Right.
hard for you, that is complex. No, I would be strict with it.
Okay.
Because just like that's where you need to practice that skill. Because if it's easy, if you feel comfortable at the easier ones, that's actually not good. Then you have to try those at even faster. But it's hard to know, like, is this a hard one?
I see.
So just set the time, I'm going to do it at 3 minutes. I'm going to aim my timer is set for 3 minutes a question. So if I do 20 questions, that's an hour that I give myself to finish it, and I have to finish it in that time. And if I don't, well, what I would do is just realize you didn't make it, you didn't finish, but then like don't burn out the questions, just try to answer them and like give it your best shot so you get that learning too. But no, don't sort of adjust or cheat for easier or harder ones. Just keep it rigid. Whatever you get is whatever you get, because it's specifically on those harder ones that you will need to figure out, like learn what the mental gymnastics are to read faster, to pick out things faster. Yeah.
There's another good question, and they ask, how do you stay focused after doing so many passages in the actual exam or test? Are there any tips on staying focused?
Oh, like how do you actually run the 26-mile marathon?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the exact question is, how do you keep yourself from wandering off from doing the questions and passages?
When you're doing like a full length? Well, by practicing that. But literally, it's a simple answer, but it's just by practicing that, because the first few times you do it, you will wander off. But the more, if you're aware that you wander off, the next time you start to wander off, just be more aware of it, realize that you're doing it. The specific things that you try to keep yourself on task, that doesn't matter so much, because there are all sorts of things that, it's not like one thing is the gold thing or like the secret weapon. Something may work for you, something may not, but I think I would argue that even just being aware of it is what helps probably the most. And realizing that, no, just redirect. Okay, I got distracted, just come back to this. I got distracted, oh, it's okay, just come back to what you're doing. And the more you do it, the better you will get at it. But it requires doing it lots and lots of times. And it will feel like that at the very beginning. There's no two ways about it. Yeah, and then so you can even do more sets even faster to like really get you up to speed. And the amount that you start at, how fast you jump, how fast you jump, how quickly you make these jumps, these intervals, or how long you spend at each level, it will vary from person to person. It's hard to tell you what to do. Like, you will know what is right. When it starts becoming easy, go faster. It's literally like you have this comfort zone. You have to work just beyond that comfort zone. If it's too far, you can't do it. Like if someone who's good at running a 200-meter dash in a certain amount of time, if you tell them, no, you got to run in half that time, they'll say impossible. It's just not possible. But if you tell them, try to run it a few seconds faster, they're like, well, I could probably work on that. But if you don't have that constant slight little stimulus, you tend to linger in that comfort zone. And that's also very much part of deliberate practice. It's like there are many skills that we do that we just do automatically, like driving. But could you drive a race car? It's a separate skill that you practice on, right? You learned as much as you needed to drive a car on the streets, and then you stopped practicing, you stopped learning. It just became an automatic thing. It stayed well within your comfort zone.
There was one last question asking, is there a cutoff for accuracy when you start moving down, or is it more of how you feel in your pace going down?
I would say that it would help to have some trend. So if you're making such huge jumps that your proficiency drops dramatically, then try making less dramatic jumps. But let's say your proficiency that you started with was 60%, and then you go a little bit faster, it drops to 50 and kind of lingers in the low 50s. Should you wait for it to go back up to 60? Not necessarily. You should kind of see it at least go up a little or plateau. But that is like, it's like a slightly separate thing on its own, the proficiency, because that has to do with realizing why you got them, like reading the answer explanations, understanding why you got them wrong, getting that feedback, and trying again, falling and trying again, falling and trying again. And that may not improve as quickly. The improvement of that may not keep up with like your improvement of speed. So I wouldn't worry about it too much if that proficiency like doesn't keep going up. Again, like these things, it's like very hard to tell you like, no, it's got to be this way, because it really does vary from person to person. Using full-length practice exams. So again, you're start of your MCAT study period on the x-axis to your exam day, and then on the y you have similarity to the actual exam, to the real thing, where at the max you have something that is the most similar that it could possibly be, a practice exam, to the real thing. It's helpful to take one at the beginning, Not as a diagnostic. It's not terribly helpful for that diagnostic to tell you what your score is as a baseline, because it's going to suck regardless. But it does give you a sense of how difficult it will be. It's good to have that mental picture to like get your butt kicked doing it, to just feel exhausted and you realize, oh my God, that's way worse than I thought it was. It's better to have that slap in the face realization a little bit earlier on, but just know that you will get better at it. And then, so for the rest of your training period, what you end up doing is some practice exams you will get, they will be more similar, some will be less similar to the exam, and that you just kind of get from word of mouth. But the ones that are less similar, if those are the ones you have access to, burn those up early on and save the good ones for later on. So because they help you with the content, they help you developing the MCAT skill, but they also, more importantly, maybe help you with the stamina. They give you the training of what it's like to get up and sit 8 in the morning, go all the way, and what it feels like to like be on the 4th section and just be very fatigued and have to still try to maintain focus and realizing that it's not working out. So you tried to go 6 miles and now you're just totally destroyed. So, but you'll try. Maybe you'll try the next day and it may not be as bad. It may be as bad, but the more you do it, the easier it'll get. But that skill of the stamina endurance doesn't depend on the quality of the exam as much. So burn the ones that are less similar to the exam, burn them up early on, use them up early on. Don't use them up at the end. This purple one is the WMC one. So the WMC has 3 practice exams. The 3rd one is probably the most similar from what people say. The 2nd one also is the most similar, and the first one may be slightly less similar to the most recent MCAT. It's helpful to have one of those halfway because it gives you a good sense of how you're doing and what you might need to change. Because if you do it halfway, you still have some time left over to change, to either ramp up or slightly alter whatever it is you're doing in your training. And then towards the very end, use the WMC practice exam. Whatever you find that is the most similar to the real exam, and the 2 WMC number 2 and number 3 are some of those, use those towards the very end. Because by that point, now you will have developed some stamina, some mental fortitude, focus. You will have developed a ton of content knowledge and a ton of MCAT skill. So you'll be very primed to take full advantage of those exams. It's kind of like another sports analogy. Like if you have to run a 200-meter dash and they tell you, okay, you got to train for it, but you're only allowed to have 1 hour on the track time. What would you do? You'd probably train, you have to get your muscles up to speed. You have to build up strength. So you can do that by running on concrete, asphalt, sand, grass, whatever. But that track that they run on the tartan track has a very specific feel to it, has a certain springiness. And it's different to run on that than it is to run on concrete. So it'd be much better to have everything else in place, like you're up to speed, your muscle development is up to par, it's where you want it to be. And now that all that stuff is in place, now you can focus on the finer details of what that track feels like under your feet, because you only have an hour. But if you burn that hour up early on, then you're going to forget what it felt like, what maneuvers you needed to do to be fast on that track. And so similar to that, it really helps to save them towards the end, where now you're in much better condition to take full advantage of them.
There's 2 good questions that I think are relevant to this. The first one is how would you prevent burnout when you're doing full-length exams throughout the weeks of study? And then someone suggested would exercise help in burnout? It
does. So what the question is asking is not so much intra-exam burnout, but inter-exam burnout, or just training in between practice question blocks. So exercise really does help a lot. Just that physical activity. And so it helps so much to make some time for that, even if it's something as simple as running for 15 minutes, if you're not someone who's generally active. The burnout part, there's a lot of mental preparation with that, like the inter-exam burnout. You think, oh, it was just so hard to do this practice exam this weekend, and I got to do another one 2 weekends from now, and you're kind of dreading it. Well, a lot of it is the mental preparation of realizing that yes, there will be some pain associated with it. And yes, it will get better little by little, but that's sort of just what it's going to have to take. There's no easy way around it. Like that's what I was saying, like most of us have never had to do any kind of training for some performance like this, where it really requires this super hardcore thing, and it doesn't negate what we've done up until now. It doesn't mean that we haven't worked hard. We just haven't been required to work hard in this way for this type of performance. But people who do, like let's say, play competitive sports, who have been doing it for years, or who are competitive violinists, they do know, because they do run those schedules and they do experience the burnout. But what ends up happening is, as they continue to do it, they usually hate it early on. But as they practice it, they come to actually love the practice. The feeling that you get that, I know it doesn't look like I'm making much progress, I'm on a plateau, but I actually am. And what I would say is, I know this maybe isn't a very satisfying answer, is, well, yeah, exercise, eat well, but have faith. Mentally, just sit down for a moment and just know that it's going to be painful. You are going to have to give up certain things in your life. It's not just, you can't maintain balance in the way that people talk about. So that you know that that's, so it's less shocking or impacting when you actually go through and feel it, that it actually is as painful as it is. Yeah, there's this, there was a second question.
How often should you do full length?
Oh, yeah.
I think that was coming, right?
Yeah, so that's one thing I forgot to mention. So if you look at these bars, the spacing of them, they get closer together later on in your training period, because you are doing them more frequently later on, because you get more benefit out of them doing them closer together later on. Early on, if it is hard. You need some recovery time in between each one. But later on, you've developed some stamina and endurance, and now it's easier to actually do them once a week. And oftentimes people, by the time they get to their exam, like the few weeks before their exam, they might be doing 1 a week, they might be doing 2 a week, and it gets easier. So when to do them, I would aim to definitely do the 3 AAMC ones, and maybe a few more on top of that. I'll talk about that, fitting all that in, actually shortly after, right after this, but I would space them out such that the actual spacing, like again, the specifics of it don't matter as much as I would recommend doing them closer together later on in your period, and the ones that are more like the exam later on in your training period. And I would aim to, probably, if it were me, I'd probably do, I don't know, 6, maybe no less than 7, the 3 AAMC ones, and then plus 4 from some other prep company. Yeah, there's this phrase in the sports world, if you practice like you play, game day is the easiest day of the week. And what they mean is that, like, it's just you've been practicing this skill so much that it kind of almost becomes second nature, that on day of performance, it's no different than another training day. So when you walk into the test center, it feels no different than another day in the library doing another practice exam. And that getting to that comfortable spot really helps with the nerves. Really helps with the anxiety that a lot is riding on that moment, because it's true, a lot is riding on that moment. There's no getting around that. But the nervousness that can make you feel can really hamper your performance. But if you've been doing it so often that you know exactly what it feels like, you know what it feels like to start at 8, you know what you're going to feel like after cars, you know sort of like how you have to eat to stay well fed but not over insulinized for the bio section afterwards and the psych section. If you have all that, you've been doing that several times, you know exactly what it's like, and this is no different. It's like no surprise. Yeah. You want to take another short break? After this, this next part is just showing you what this looks like in everyday practice, with some of the questions about like how you space this out, how you make a calendar and stuff like that. Do you want to take a break or just keep going? Okay, so what does this look like in everyday practice? So someone was asking, like, how do you do this? Do you do blocks of practice questions, exams, and if so, what do they look like? Well, you're timing yourself, like I mentioned, in the way that you do the timing. You're always timing yourself in one way or another, whether it's early on just to get that baseline, or then after that, every other block of practice questions, slightly trying to get a little faster. A little faster. You're doing blocks of 15 to 40 questions, especially early on. Like more than that, it's just you start to get burned out and you get less, you squeeze less learning out of each session. Take a short break, 15 minutes, probably no more than half hour, and then review. So the review means going over the answer explanations for all of them, both the ones you got right and the ones you got wrong. but especially for the ones you got wrong, to identify why you got it wrong and how you're going to address it. So remember, you're getting that feedback and you're making this document. And so in this document, back when I did it, was like on Word or even on paper, but I would have just the ones that I got wrong in red, so they were easy to go back to and look up. And it included just a few lines about what the concept was and why I got it wrong. Usually, sometimes I added what I was going to do, but usually from there it was obvious like what I needed to do, because I just knew when I would go back and look at it, oh yeah, I know I got that wrong because I didn't know this thing, or I goofed that up, or whatever. But you're reviewing these thousands of practice questions and writing up your document, which helps burn it into your head. The act of manipulating info helps it stick. You can search it and review it afterwards for keywords, because let's say you're on your like 1500th question and you encounter a question that like, I totally bombed this question. And I remember seeing something like it like a few weeks ago. It was about liver enzymes or whatever nonsense. But you can't remember exactly what. Well, you have keywords. So just you search for the keyword and you can find these old questions. And one thing I would do is just outline them. Like, so for you world, that's one question bank you can use. Just write down for each one, like each time you do it, I'm going to do a block of 20 questions on this day. That was from last week. On this day, I'm going to just write down your world, the date, 20 questions, and then number 1 through 20. And for the ones you got wrong, there should be something in each one of those slots. For the ones you got right, sometimes it is helpful to read. Well, you should always read the answer explanation, but sometimes it's helpful to write something down like, I got this right by luck. I got it right for the wrong reason. Or the answer explanation, especially for UWorld, because they have really good answer explanations. I learned about what this question could look like if it was asked from a slightly different angle. Because they do that. They explain what the answer is, and they oftentimes add a little blurb about it to say, they can ask this from this angle, from that angle. And so you get the benefit of not only seeing it from the square side, but they show you, oh, this is what it would look like and what the answer choices would look like. Or these answer choices would make sense, the other ones, if it was presented from the triangle side. So like, what do you use? It's hard to know. Regardless of whatever you do use, I would include the AAMC material. That sort of should be a must. And beyond that, whether you use Kaplan, Gold Standard, Princeton Review, whatever, don't lose too much sleep over like, crap, I picked the wrong one, because it will matter much more how you use them than what you use. You can search the internet forums to see like what people say, and people do leave lots of reviews and their experiences on Reddit, and SDN, and so forth. So as you can see, I've been like researching this stuff and like doing questions. From everything I've seen, if I were taking the MCAT now, what I would probably do is a mix that looks something like this. I would definitely use UWorld. Back in the day when I took step 1, they were USMLE World, and it was by far the best question bank for step 1. It was amazing, and mostly because the questions were very similar to the exam, but the answer explanations were fantastic. And a lot of people said they now have a question bank for the MCAT, and a lot of people are saying, yes, it's very similar. The answer explanations are great. So I started doing them, and they are pretty good. The question styles and levels of difficulty that I've encountered so far are a little different from the AAMC ones, meaning that on average, they seem to be a little easier and not as complex. But again, this is just starting, and I like haven't gone through the whole question bank. But I would definitely do that, because that will produce a lot of content knowledge learning, and it will develop a lot of that MCAT skill. Khan Academy, it has those questions that use those hints that really get you in the mode of thinking, I need to gather these ingredients, I need to make sure I have them on hand, this is how you manipulate them, and this is how you produce the answer. And they're free, which is very nice. I've heard a lot of people say good things about the videos. I haven't looked at them myself, but they're also free. And all their free MCAT stuff, and I think most of it's free, they developed it with the AAMC. They like partnered up. So, which means there's a decent chance that their level of difficulty in question style and depth and how much they abstract things and force you to do the critical thinking is similar to the real exam. Next step, you have to get more full-length practice exams from somewhere. It's just from what I've read, people seem to recommend next step. Again, I have no financial ties to any of these companies. I get no kickbacks whatsoever. This is just, I'm telling you, if I had to do the MCAT now as a pre-med, this is probably where I would start. Doesn't mean that I would stick with it, but it's where I would start, because you got to start somewhere. And so you ask yourself, well, how long will it take? Like, I have 3 months, I have 1 month, like how do you fit all this in? Well, you can be strategic about it, at least with the questions. And that matters so much more than the reading. Let's say an MCAT question takes you 4 minutes in total, 1.5 minutes to do, and 2.5 minutes to review on average. It might be a little more, it might be a little less. For one person, it might be a little more, a little less, but let's say 4 minutes. That means you can do 120, it takes you 120 minutes to do 30 questions. And so that's a 2-hour block. If you do 2 of those 2-hour blocks, you get 60 questions in a day. 60 questions a day for 5 days a week gives you 300 questions. And if you do that for 8 weeks, you produce your 2,400 questions. Now, that's a pretty good number. Is it enough? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Like, if you look at, I'll show you all this material. The section banks, the question packs from AAMC, plus the section bank, plus UWorld itself is only 2,400 questions. From what I've read, the exams, the practice exams are the best thing from the AAMC. The second best is the section bank, and the least of it are the question packs. But I'd probably still do the question packs. And then the practice exams, they're their own separate thing. So this together is already 4,000 questions. So how the hell are you going to fit all that into whatever time you have? That's a lot of questions, right? Well, so let's just take the blocks of practice questions, not practice exams. 2,400 questions. Spending 4 minutes on average per question means it's going to take you 160 hours. If you take that 160 hours and you divide it into 3-hour blocks, you get 54 blocks. Now you just got to figure out where in your schedule and your calendar you're going to fit all these 54 blocks in. Let's say you do 2 a day, 27 days. It's just about a month. That's not so bad. And if you do 5 days a week, meaning you get weekends off, then it's 5.5 weeks. Doesn't seem so bad. So you start filling this out on your calendar and you think, okay, Monday I'm going to do a 3-hour block and then another 3-hour block, because that's what I said, every day, 2 of them, every day for 5 days a week. And the next week, and the next week, and the next week, and the next week. And quickly realize, oh crap, like that's a lot of time. That's like so full and jam-packed. Like, what if I'm working? What if I'm going to school? What if I just don't have yet the mental fortitude to keep up that pace? Well, blocking it out like that really helps you see that. And it's not just that. Now you got to deal with the practice exams. So each exam is 230 questions. And that takes about 7 hours just to do the exam if you follow the AAMC timing. And then to review it, again, doing 4 minutes a question on average, it's going to take you 15 hours to do and review. So that's why I would do it one day, review it half of it that day, and maybe half the next day. Because 15 hours, that's a long time, and you will probably not be getting as much as you could from it in terms of reviewing and learning the content knowledge and developing the MCAT skill. So now you fit that in, you fit 2 of them. And all of a sudden you realize, it looks like a lot. It's only 6 hours a day, but that if you're gonna do content review, the reading, the Kaplan books, that's not in there. You gotta fit that in there too. You gotta fit in your exercise and whatever else you have on your schedule. Maybe you don't have the luxury of early on, you're going to school, you have a semester, whatever. So then you realize, okay, I'm going to rework this back to the drawing board for these 2,400 questions. I might take a little longer. I'm going to spend 5 minutes on them, 2 minutes to do it, 3 minutes to answer on average. It's 200 hours. Now I'm only going to do 2.5-hour blocks. So that's 80 blocks, 2 a day, 40 days. It will take you 8 weeks to do that. So now we're back to up to 8 weeks. And you think, okay, I'm going to start filling this on my schedule. You start doing it actually. And after the first week of doing these like 10 blocks, you realize that's very tiring, and I can't keep it up. I'm like fatigued. So now you do just one block a day, and you do them for the rest of that month, and you fit in a full-length practice exam. Review partly that day, partly the next day. So that's 4 weeks, and then you look at what the next 4 weeks might look like. You're still doing these blocks of 2.5-hour blocks of practice questions. You fit in another couple full-length practice exams. You're in the 3rd month or 3rd set of 4 weeks, and now towards the end of that, you're fitting in more blocks of practice questions because you're developing your stamina. You can actually do them and get a lot of learning from them every day. You do 2 more full-length practice exams, and now in the last month, now you've actually completed your 80 blocks. That's 80 blocks of that. That's in just these blue and pink ones here. That's 2,400 questions, practice questions, not including your full-length practice exams, and that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 practice exams. let's say you get to here and you realize, it's not exactly at the score I would like it to be, and I still have some time. Well, during this last month, that's when it really helps to have that last month free, because you can really start to ramp up your practice. Just like now you're primed to use the track, now you've built up stamina, you got a whole lot of content knowledge built up, your MCAT skills are pretty good, so now you can start doing 3-hour blocks, 2 of them every day, maybe even more. Maybe you're doing 4 or 5-hour blocks. And you do your AAMC practice exam, number 2 and number 3. Sorry, I didn't put the 1 here, but it's somewhere there. So AAMC practice exam number 2 and number 3. And every day, pretty much, you're cracking away at these questions. You're not really doing any content review. You're already at the phase where you're just doing practice questions. And who knows, maybe you don't even need to take a day off. Maybe it's just easy to do them every day now. And then you do this one maybe a week before the exam, and you realize, okay, well, it's pretty good, but I still have a week, so I can work on a few things. So you do more questions. You have your last full-length practice exam from Next Step or whatever. And then you just take it easy for the few days before the exam. For the day before the exam, definitely I wouldn't do anything. Just relax. Like, go hiking. Don't get drunk. Like, just relax. And for the day before, maybe also just relax, take it easy. Because if you have it, whatever you're not gonna, whatever deficiencies you have, it's unlikely that you will fix them in a dramatic fashion in these last 2 days. And if you really work hard the day before, you will be stressed and not in good condition in terms of sleep and focus and all that for exam day. And so throughout all this, yes, like I was saying earlier, you will have to put things on hold. Your life will not be normal. Like people who do that crazy violin competitions and sports and Olympics, their schedules are like this. They don't have a normal life. It's like cracking away they get homeschooled so that they can fit in 8 to 10 hours of gymnastics practice at the gym every day, 5 to 6, 7 days a week. So you do put things on hold, but that's unfortunately just what it is. And it gives you a good glimpse into what parts of med school will be like. And it will be like that. And training for step 1 is also just like this. And so in one sense, it's kind of a good eye opener, because if you start doing it and you realize, this really isn't for me. I mean, it starts to give you that, gives you an inside look into that. I'm not trying to discourage you and saying you shouldn't do it. You should definitely do it, because for whatever reason you're doing it for, you should definitely push on. But just know that it gives you a good glimpse into what your future will be like. You're not going to be going out all the time. You're not going to be having the fun and relaxed life that you may otherwise have. And most of your life will be put on hold. You will have some balance. You will exercise. You're not going to lose everything, but you're not going to have everything that you otherwise might have. Yeah, make time for exercise. You can definitely fit it in, even with like a full 8 hours of study a day. You can fit it in. And keep in mind, this was a pretty light schedule. If it were me, I would definitely cram it up way more than that. That was just like kind of for the sake of argument, like 1 2.5 hour block a day. No, I would do way more than that. Yeah. Maybe in the first week or 2, just to ease into it, but soon that in this like second month, I'd be doing way more than that. And again, that's not even fitting in the content review, which the more and more I look at it, I probably do less and less of it.
There's 2 good questions that I wanted to ask before we go on too much. But the first one, this one kind of takes it back a bit, but someone's having a hard time finding practice questions specifically for the psychology and the sociology section. Is there any recommendations that you have on finding specific questions for those sections? Yeah.
I mean, you're going to have the practice sections in the AAMC practice exams. UWorld has a section for those questions. It's not nearly as many questions as the science stuff, but they do have that. No, I guess the short answer is I don't. And even beyond that, at this point at least, I don't know which ones seem to be more reliable. It's so new, yeah. Yeah. Just at least suffice to say that whatever practice exams you do, they will have those sections in them. So at least that's one source. So let's say you can't find a good question bank. You can just use the practice exams, just don't do all of them at once. Like burn them up in small chunks. Like just do 20 questions at a time. And then some of them allow you to finish and then retake it, so you can kind of look at your answers right then and there. Some of them don't, so it's kind of like you have to, or it's just they work different. Like you might have to, let's say you're only going to do 20 questions out of that block of 59, but you get multiple starts. So you do 20, 1 to 20, and then you just end the exam, so you get the rest of them wrong. You review those 1 to 20, and the next day when you're going to do 21 to 40, you restart the exam. They give you like multiple restarts, So you retake it again, it's new and fresh, and now you just do 20 to 40 and something like that. So there are ways to use those practice exams in smaller chunks as blocks of practice questions. Because doing a whole, for the sake of practice, like a block of practice questions, 59 is a lot to do. And you will have, I guarantee you will have reduced amounts of learning and retention doing that, rather than taking like a block of 20 at a time, block of 20 and block of 20 at a time. And what was the other question?
I think that was it. I'm answering the technical ones right now.
Okay. Yeah. If you are feeling incredibly depressed and suicidal, which can happen and is a very serious thing, definitely get help. Like, even if it means going to the ED, because it's very intense and stressful. Like, that happens to people who train competitive gymnastics and stuff. It drives you a little nuts, because it is a little nuts to live your life like that. But this last thing, try to make a 1 to 2 month block of dedicated time, where if you do have to do it within a semester, don't take hard courses that semester, that quarter. Try to plan it out so you take the easiest possible classes, because this really is much harder than you imagine it to be, the training for it. And it really requires this super high level of OCD and focus and attention, and just day after day after day after day after nonstop, day after day, cracking away at questions. And it's really hard to do that if you have all these other things on your mind. So one thing you can do, like the nice thing about the MCAT is that you can schedule it at multiple times now. It's not just 2 times a year. So let's say you know you're not going to apply this year, you're going to apply the next cycle, and you're going to take it in summer like that. Well, you can start prepping for it during your spring semester or spring quarter, and as soon as it ends, as long as you make sure your summer is free, then if you don't have to work, which is a luxury that hopefully you can have, then you can have that 1 to 2 months right before the exam where you treat this as your full-time job, like 40 to 50 to 60 hours a week. This is your full-time job that you focus, that you get up, you do, and that's it. You take your lunch and you go back to doing it just like a job. Because in that last month, that's when all these things start getting, these things in your head start coalescing. Things start gelling. Like at first it feels rough. Yeah, you're kind of slipping and sliding all over the place, making all sorts of mistakes. But as you get closer, things start to click. You start to see the matrix. You know the architecture of their questions. And now you can really ramp up, because you can take full advantage of that. Your stamina is up, your knowledge is up, your skills are up. And so it really helps to have that 1 or 2 months before you take the exam of just dedicated time. So as much as it's possible to do that, do that. And someone might think, well, I really want to apply this year, and they tell me I shouldn't do my MCAT late because then my application will be late and it puts me in a disadvantage. So, well, that's a tough pickle, because like someone might, depending on your situation, might advise you just wait a year and apply next year. Like, I kid you not, this exam is so important. Unfortunately, for better or for worse, I'm not saying that's a good thing, but it is so important in the eyes of many admissions committees that you might think, well, I just want to get on with my life. You may not do well, and you may apply and may not get in. You may still have to do it, apply again next year. And so sometimes it is better to just make space and time for it, to do it well, even if it means you are delaying your application by a year. Because yes, it also does put you at a significant disadvantage to submit late if you take it in whenever, like August, September, and your application is only complete then. Yes, it does put you at a real disadvantage, like a tangible disadvantage compared to other students, as opposed to submitting your complete application June 1st.
Their specific question is mid-July too late to take the MCAT if you're applying that cycle?
It's hard. So it's hard to give definites like that, like too late, like now, like July 10th was okay, but now July 11th is now, oh, you missed it. Like now it's too late. So it's a spectrum, right? It gets harder and harder. Like end of June is not going to be as bad as end of August if you're applying that year. So it's hard to say, like how much of a disadvantage will it put you in? Some. And also just think, well, is this really a good situation I'm setting myself up for? Can I make this really great block of time, of rich, dedicated time, where I can focus on this, like treat it like a full-time job, leading up to that mid-July exam? And if it is, then maybe worth it. And if everything else is in place. But also think, like, it's not always a bad thing to wait an extra year, because in that extra year, you can do so much in terms of working, getting experience, all the like extracurricular activities that you have to build up. You can develop yourself as a person, which never hurts. It's never a wasted year. And I know, and at your age, you may feel like, oh crap, I'm so old. I'm like 24, and I just want to get on with my life. You live a decade, and you look back and you realize how fast that time went, how little of a difference that 1 year made. But looking back, what doesn't change is how big of a difference it made for you to have time to adequately prepare for this. Was there another question? So I guess in the end for that, it's hard to say. Yes, it does put you at a disadvantage. Maybe consider like delaying it, but because if other things are, if the rest of your application is not stellar, you can still have, you still may need the year to work on other parts of the application.
Yeah.
And then you don't have to worry. Then you can take more time if you need for the MCAT.
I took off extra time. I took my test almost 3 years before I actually applied, which is not I wouldn't recommend that. But I kept putting it off because I wanted to save my time. But if I would have applied that cycle, I probably wouldn't have done very well.
Yeah.
There is one question. I guess someone saw some advice on Student Doctor Network, which I always feel some type of way about.
Yeah.
That they were asking them to take a practice exam every other day the last month that they were studying. And I just suggested I don't think that's a good idea because that's too much. They're going to burn out. Instead, I wouldn't even do past one test a week if they wanted to push it. Do you have any thoughts about what's the maximum amount of times you can take the test?
Yeah. Again, that varies from person to person. I think every other day is a bit excessive, especially if it means the last month, which means you did it for 15 exams, like every other day. That is a little nuts. You can sort of graph this out. There's a limit of returns of like the benefit you get. It goes up, but at some point it peaks and starts coming back down, right? Like the benefit you get from that. Because you're tired, you lose focus, you can't review them adequately. That's a lot of where the benefit comes from reviewing the answer explanations. That takes time and focus. It's hard work, it's hard mental work to think about what you're doing as you're doing it and realize, oh, I got it wrong for this reason. I either need to review this or just do more practice questions, being focused on the fact that I tend to forget this one equation. I tend to forget how to manipulate this one equation. And so that is excessive, yes, to do one every other day. Like I highly doubt that, unless maybe some people can do it, but I would bet that most people can't. And yeah, it's safe to say that like what most people end up doing is about one a week. Some people, you hear them do like twice a week, like every 3 to 4 days. Maybe in the last week, you do like so what I would probably do is like in the month leading up to the last month, maybe do one every 2 weeks, something like that. In the last month, do one a week, and in the last week, do maybe 2 in that last week. Because you get in that training mode of now you're doing this performance, the whole thing. You're acting it out from beginning to finish, and you know what it feels like to get up at 8 and to be hungry and to have to go to the bathroom and all that. And so that may make sense just at the very end. But yeah, I would definitely want to do that.
No questions on the chat so far.
Okay, so that's pretty much it. The one summary point, all that stuff wraps down to this: do thousands of practice questions in the right way. That in the right way means you're getting feedback on the ones you got wrong, why you got them wrong. That feedback is timely, specific, and actionable. It comes shortly after the question, after you do that block of practice questions. Now, it's not like question, answer, question, answer, question. No, you do the block 1 to 20 questions, and then you review. It's specific, meaning you identify which of those thought processes went wrong so that you can create an actionable target to lower the likelihood of making that same mistake in the future, and you track your work. The act of tracking your work is so helpful for burning it into your head and many other things. That's it. That was long. I will condense it. I mean, hopefully it clarifies things. Like,
I think that's great advice because I took my test a few years ago, and I think knowing if I would have known that, I think I would have felt better about my pace, because I think that was the biggest question I had for me was I was working full time, studying part time, so I had a hard time with my pace. And I think your tip on how many questions you really need to review to get really confident at those MCAT skills really helps put into perspective how much time you need for your own study and how much time do you want to study and what other responsibilities do you have. And I think that chart, I think everyone had great feedback on the chart that you had of like how to spread out your blocks, really helps personalize what it means to you.
Yeah, and that's when people say they come up with these crazy schedules of I'm going to do an hour of orgo review followed by an hour of chem review and then 20 minutes of physics review and then a few practice. It's like, it's insane. It really doesn't matter. Like I think really just what matters is making sure that you are going to do a certain amount of practice questions and then figure out how you're going to fit them in. All the other stuff you can fit in like other moments, but that has to be high quality, dedicated time to the practice question. Like when you're focused on doing it. The reading can happen here or there. It doesn't have nearly as high a payoff as the practice question. So I actually wouldn't even plan, if it were me, I probably wouldn't like plan blocks of time for reading. I know that would fit in somewhere, but I would protect the blocks of time for practice questions like a hawk. Like that I would definitely plan out, block out, make sure I can fit all that in, knowing that things happen in life. You may have some personal issue or some family issue that takes time away and it sort of delays things a little. Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, it's just it's something I care about a lot, this whole MCAT thing. And that's why I actually started doing practice questions all over again. Is the why. So why am I doing this? If I could just take 2 more minutes of your time. Medical school enrollment by race and ethnicity. This is data from the AAMC. Basically, it's something everybody knows is that the percentage of Black and Latino medical students and Native American medical students, so racial and ethnic minorities or people who are underrepresented in medicine when you look at race and ethnicity, they have remained about the same percentage in med school for the past 40 years. That hasn't changed. Despite numerous pipeline programs, despite millions of dollars poured into that effort, and there are numerous reasons for that. It's not that these pipeline programs don't work, many of them do work. But there are many barriers in that phase to getting to med school, and one of them is the MCAT. It's a very large barrier, and it's a larger barrier for some than others. For many, like socioeconomic reasons, for reasons that have nothing to do with your ability to be a doctor, for reasons that, let's say, your family grew up poor, or you grew up poor with your family, and you didn't have the best high school education, which meant you weren't as prepared for college. You didn't go to the best college. You didn't have good college study skills. It's like all those things just build up on top of each other, and they have nothing to do with you as a person, and all to do with just the luck of what situation you were born into versus somebody else. And that's never taken into account. And this is such a huge barrier. But the good thing is that it's a great target to hit because it is a one-time performance, and because you can modify it with all this stuff that I've been talking about. Because people figure this out, like for ice skating, for karate, for chess, for painting, for surgery, for they figured out how the people that are really good at what they do, how did they get to be? You can take all that stuff and apply it smack right onto this. And so it makes it a great target to modify, and it really will make a difference in terms of, I think it can make a difference in terms of changing those numbers. So what I'm doing is developing a deliberate practice model for improving MCAT performance, which would be, so seeing as how there's very little MCAT literature on this, I will produce that MCAT evidence-based literature on this, make it evidence-based, package it into some user-friendly package that's easy to understand, and then keep it open source, just freely disseminated amongst institutions, amongst anybody who wants it, but I would freely disseminate it amongst institutions that serve students underrepresented in medicine. And then it would just remain open source, because like that's another crime. It's like how your prep courses, just, they may help, but they only help, one thing they do is widen the socioeconomic gap of who gets into med school and who doesn't. And again, that is determined by something that's just like luck of the draw and where you were born and what situation you grew up in. Very little to do with you or your promise as a doctor.
There's a last question. Any good books specifically around sports psychology or something that they can help to motivate them during this process?
Oh yeah, well, so that book that I mentioned, Peak,
okay.
It's called, title is Peak. The author is, first name is Anders, A-N-D-E-R-S, last name Erickson, E-R-I-C-S-S-O-N. Yeah, he's the Swedish psychologist who works at Florida State University, and he's dedicated his whole career, his whole life, his academic career, to studying this stuff, to figuring out what are the differences in expert performers and how they train, and like how is it that makes them so good at what they do. And so yeah, all this stuff, like this stuff that I'm saying is nothing new. It's just it's been studied in many other fields, and so but the new part is just it hasn't really been applied in a systematic or well-studied way to the MCAT. But that's what I'm going to do. That's what I want to do. It's not a magic bullet. It's not going to guarantee a 528, but I think it does give you one of the best chances of having the greatest degrees of improvement from wherever you start to wherever you end. Yeah, and there just isn't much evidence for what prep method to use, so I will create that evidence. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you everybody who was listening. Hopefully it was helpful to you.